My mom forged my name and drained my accounts because I refused to pay my sister's $25K debt. When I found out, I kept quiet. The next day, a loud knock arrived. "Police, madam." My name is Sloan. I am 25 years old, and I work as a software developer living in the heart of Denver, Colorado. If you had asked me a year ago what my absolute biggest fear in life was, I would have told you it was going back to the way I lived when I was a kid. Growing up, my house was a place of extreme contrasts. It was a place where there was always enough money for certain things, but absolutely nothing for others. I am the older sister, but you would never know it by looking at how my mother, Diane, treated us. My younger sister, Paige, who is 22 now, was the undisputed golden child. She was the one who got the expensive cheerleading camps, the brand new outfits every single semester, and the car handed to her on her 16th birthday. Me? I was the scapegoat. I was the child who was constantly told that money was tight, that times were hard, and that I needed to learn the value of a hard day of work. I started working at a local diner the moment I turned 16, just so I could afford my own winter coats and basic school supplies. I remember opening our refrigerator on a Tuesday night, seeing it completely empty except for a jar of mustard and some wilted lettuce, and then watching Paige walk through the front door holding 3 shopping bags full of designer shoes that Diane had just bought her. That kind of inequality does something to a kid. It wires your brain to believe that safety is an illusion, and the only person who will ever catch you when you fall is yourself. That is exactly why I became obsessed with saving money. Every single paycheck I earned from the diner, and later from my career in software development, went straight into a savings account at a local credit union. Over the years, I managed to build up a safety net of $25,000. To some wealthy people out there, maybe $25,000 does not sound like life-changing money. But to me, it was my literal armor. It meant I would never have to go back to an empty fridge. It meant I would never have to beg Diane for a single dime. It was my physical safety, my peace of mind, and my proof that I had survived my childhood. But of course, Paige was a completely different story. Paige never learned how to save a penny because Diane was always there to catch her. And that reckless lifestyle finally caught up with her. Paige had recently gotten engaged to a great guy named Trevor. Trevor was a practical, hard-working guy who had no idea about the toxic financial habits Paige was hiding. Behind his back, to fund a lavish lifestyle and keep up the appearance of being a wealthy bride-to-be, Paige had racked up a staggering $25,000 in high-interest credit card debt. The creditors were calling nonstop. The interest was burying her alive. And worse, Trevor had found a hidden credit card statement. He was furious. He gave Paige an ultimatum: clear the debt, figure out a payment plan, or the wedding was entirely off. Paige naturally panicked. And when Paige panicked, she went crying to Diane. And when Diane needed a problem solved, she looked directly at my bank account. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from a long day at the office and was heating up some dinner when my phone started ringing. It was Diane. I sighed, letting it ring a few times before answering, already bracing myself for whatever drama she was bringing to my doorstep. "Sloan, we have a massive family emergency," Diane said the moment I picked up. Her voice was not frantic. It was firm, almost authoritative. There was no greeting, no asking how my day was. Just straight to the point. She laid out the entire situation with Paige and Trevor, painting Paige as some poor, innocent victim of predatory lending rather than a grown woman who had spent wildly beyond her means. "So, Trevor is threatening to leave her, and the wedding is in jeopardy," Diane continued, her tone shifting into a demand. "I need you to transfer $25,000 to Paige's account by tomorrow morning so we can clear this up." I actually laughed. I thought it was a terrible, out-of-touch joke. You have got to be kidding me, right? You're asking me to empty out my entire life savings to pay off shoes and vacations that Paige bought. I am not asking, Sloan. I am telling you, Diane snapped back, her voice dropping into that icy, controlling register I knew so well from my childhood. This is what families do. We are a family unit. Paige made a tiny mistake, and you have all this money just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. You are single. You have a great job. You will easily make it back in a year or two." The sheer audacity of her logic left me momentarily speechless. She wanted me to liquidate the very safety net I had bled for, just to cover up her golden child's irresponsibility. I felt my chest tighten, but years of therapy had taught me how to hold my ground. "Absolutely not," I said, my voice quiet but completely steady. "I am not giving her a single dollar. That is my emergency fund. I earned it." Paige made her bed, and now she has to figure out how to pay for it. Maybe she should sell some of those bags you bought her. The line went dead silent for about 3 seconds. And then, the explosion happened. Diane completely lost her mind. She started screaming through the speaker, calling me every name in the book. She said I was a selfish, cold-blooded mistake. She told me that I had always been jealous of my sister, that I was a bitter, lonely woman who wanted to see her own family suffer. "You are no daughter of mine if you let your sister's life fall apart over some pieces of paper," Diane yelled, her voice cracking with rage. "Then I guess I am no daughter of yours," I replied, and I hung up the phone. I tossed the phone onto the couch and stood there in the quiet of my apartment. My hands were shaking a little bit, but mostly, I just felt a profound sense of relief. I had finally stood up to her. I had set a hard financial boundary, and I had defended myself. I went to bed that night feeling a strange sense of empowerment. I thought the worst of it was over. I thought the storm had passed. I had absolutely no idea that the real nightmare was already in motion. The next morning started like any other normal Wednesday. I woke up around 7 in the morning, stretched, walked into my small kitchen, and started brewing a pot of black coffee. The sun was shining through the windows, hitting the Denver skyline. I felt good. I felt free. I sat down at my kitchen island with my warm mug, grabbed my phone, and casually opened my banking app just to check if my direct deposit from work had cleared. The app loaded. The little blue circle spun on the screen for a second. And then the numbers appeared. My checking account looked normal. But right below it, where my high-yield savings account usually sat like a comforting, sturdy brick wall, was a number that made my heart physically stop beating. $0.00. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes, thinking my vision was blurry or the app was glitching. I refreshed the page. The blue circle spun again. $0.00. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over me. It felt like someone had injected ice water directly into my veins. My ears started ringing with a high-pitched whine, and my vision tunneled. The coffee mug slipped from my trembling hand and shattered on the hardwood floor, dark liquid splashing everywhere, but I did not even care. I frantically tapped into the transaction history of the savings account. Right there, at the very top of the ledger, processed late yesterday afternoon just hours before Diane had called me, was a single, massive deduction. $25,000. The description next to it read, "Emergency family wire transfer, approved in branch." I could not breathe. My safety net, my years of scrubbing diner tables, my late nights coding until my eyes burned, my armor against poverty, it was all gone. Simply wiped off the face of the earth. My first panicked thought was that someone had stolen my identity on the dark web. I scrambled to dial the customer service number for the local credit union where I had kept the money since I was a teenager. The automated system felt like it took hours to navigate. Finally, a representative answered. I was practically hyperventilating as I gave her my account number and social security details. "Ma'am, please calm down. I am looking at your account right now," the representative said. "Yes, I see the outgoing wire transfer for $25,000. It was authorized in person at our Aurora branch yesterday afternoon. I was at work yesterday afternoon. I did not authorize anything," I shouted, tears of pure panic finally spilling over my cheeks. "Who authorized it? Where did the money go?" There was the sound of typing on the other end. "Let me pull up the wire transfer slip." "Okay, it looks like it was transferred to an external checking account under the name of Paige Henderson. And the authorization signature." The representative paused, sounding confused. "Ma'am, it says here it was authorized by the joint account holder on the legacy profile, Diane Henderson." The world entirely stopped spinning. The air in my apartment felt thick and suffocating. It was not a Russian hacker. It was not a data breach. It was an inside job. It was my own mother. She had not called me last night to ask for the money. She had called me because she had already stolen it, and she wanted to see if she could gaslight me into agreeing to it after the fact. The sheer evil of it was too massive to comprehend in that moment. I hung up the phone, fell to my knees amidst the spilled coffee and broken ceramic, and just stared at the wall in total silence. I did not go to work that day. Instead, I threw on a pair of sweatpants, grabbed my car keys, and drove straight to the credit union branch in Aurora, the exact location where the theft had occurred. The entire 30-minute drive felt like an out-of-body experience. I was not crying anymore. The shock had burned away the tears, leaving behind a cold, hard knot of determination in my stomach. I needed to understand exactly how she had bypassed the banking security. When I walked into the branch, I demanded to speak to the branch manager immediately. I sat in a small, glass-walled office with a nervous-looking man in a cheap suit, sliding my driver's license across the desk. I told him my life savings had been stolen by someone who was not me, and I wanted the paper trail. He pulled up my profile on his computer, his eyes darting nervously between the screen and my face. He spent 10 minutes clicking through menus, his expression growing more and more grim. Finally, he sighed and turned the monitor slightly toward me. "Miss Henderson, I am incredibly sorry, but I see exactly what happened here," he explained, pointing to a deeply buried screen on his software. "When you were 16 years old, you opened a student savings account here. Because you were a minor, your mother, Diane Henderson, was legally required to be a joint account holder. But I closed that account." I interrupted. "When I turned 18, I opened a brand new adult profile. A completely different account number." "You did," the manager nodded. "You opened a new account. But you did not officially sever the legacy profile linking you and your mother in our older mainframe system. It is a terrible bureaucratic flaw. Because her social security number was still linked to your primary customer ID, she technically had legacy override permissions." I stared at him, my jaw tight. "So she just walked in and took my money?" "It is worse than that," he said quietly. He pulled out a scanned copy of the wire transfer authorization form and slid it across the desk. "She came in yesterday afternoon. She spoke to one of our oldest tellers, a woman who has worked here for 20 years. Your mother used her own ID, but she also forged your signature on the primary authorization line. She told the teller a horrific story. She said you were in a sudden medical coma after a car accident and that the family desperately needed to consolidate funds to pay for emergency surgery. The teller, acting out of sympathy and seeing the legacy link, overrode the standard security protocols and pushed the wire transfer through directly to your sister's account." I looked down at the piece of paper. Right there, on the bottom line, was a terrible, shaky attempt at mimicking my signature. It was so obviously fake, but wrapped in a story of a tragic medical emergency. The bank had bought it completely. Diane had used my childhood against me. She had weaponized a bank error and preyed on human empathy just to steal my money. The manager looked terrified, clearly realizing the massive legal liability the credit union was now facing. He offered to start a fraud investigation, but warned me that because it was a family member and a legacy joint account, getting the money back could take months of civil litigation. I took the copy of the forged document, folded it neatly, and put it in my purse. I did not want a slow civil dispute. I wanted blood. I walked out of the credit union and sat in the driver's seat of my car in the parking lot. The sun was beating down on the windshield, making the inside of the car uncomfortably hot, but I was shivering. I had the physical evidence. I had the forged document. But I knew how Diane operated. If the police confronted her, she would twist the story. She would claim it was a misunderstanding, that I had given verbal permission, or that it was actually her money from years ago. I needed something completely bulletproof. I needed her to confess from her own mouth. I pulled out my phone and downloaded an advanced call recording application. I double-checked the state laws on my browser, confirming that Colorado is a one-party consent state, meaning as long as I was a part of the conversation, I could record it legally without telling her. I hit the bright red record button, took a deep breath to steady my shaking voice, and dialed Diane's number. She answered on the second ring. She sounded absolutely cheerful, like she was having the best day of her life. "Well, hello there," Diane said, her tone dripping with a sickening sweetness. "Have you finally called to apologize for being so dramatic last night?" I dug my fingernails into my steering wheel. I forced my voice to sound defeated, small, and confused. "Mom, I just checked my bank account. The $25,000 is gone." "What did you do?" Diane let out a light, breezy chuckle. "Oh, Sloan, stop overreacting. I simply took initiative. You were being entirely too stubborn last night, so I went down to the credit union and reallocated the family resources. The money is sitting safely in Paige's account, and Trevor is going to stay. The wedding is saved. You should be happy for your sister." "Reallocated?" I asked, keeping my voice shaky. "Mom, you took all of it. How did you even do that?" "I did not give you permission. I was not even there." "Please, I do not need your permission to manage our family's finances," she scoffed, completely falling into my trap. I knew the old tellers there. "I just walked into the Aurora branch, showed my ID, and told them you were incapacitated. I signed the little wire form for you, and they moved it right over. It was incredibly easy. Honestly, you should thank me for showing you how vulnerable your bank is." My heart pounded furiously against my ribs. I had it. She had just admitted to going to the branch, lying to the bank, and forging my signature. But I needed her to confirm she knew she was stealing. "Mom, that is literally theft. That is my money from my job." "You forged my name," I said, letting a bit of real anger seep into my words. "Oh, grow up, Sloan," Diane snapped, the sweetness instantly evaporating into her true, toxic self. "It is not theft, it is family duty. You owe me for raising you. You owe me for putting a roof over your head. Paige needed that money right now. You are a single girl who sits at a computer all day. You will make another 25 grand. Consider this your contribution to the family. And if you dare try to call the bank and cancel it, I will tell the entire family how incredibly selfish you are. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," I whispered, and I tapped the red button to stop the recording before hanging up. I sat there and played the audio back. The sound of her smug, arrogant voice confessing to multiple felonies echoed through my car. She truly believed she was untouchable. She believed that because she was my mother, the laws of the real world simply did not apply to her. She was about to find out how wrong she was. I did not want to be alone in my apartment with my thoughts, so I called my best friend, Gwen. I have known Gwen since we were freshmen in college. She is a no-nonsense, incredibly practical woman who works in corporate human resources. She does not tolerate drama, and she does not sugarcoat anything. I told her I had an emergency, and she immediately left work on her lunch break to meet me at a quiet diner downtown. When I sat down in the booth across from her, I looked like an absolute wreck. I slid the folded copy of the forged wire transfer across the table. Then, I placed my phone down, hit play on the audio recording, and let Gwen listen to the entire conversation with Diane. Gwen sat perfectly still, her coffee mug suspended halfway to her mouth. As Diane's voice filled the space between us, bragging about the forgery and calling me selfish, Gwen's face shifted from confusion to shock and finally to a look of absolute, cold disgust. When the recording finished, the diner felt unusually quiet. "Sloan," Gwen said, her voice dangerously calm. "Tell me you are not going to let her get away with this." I rubbed my forehead, the societal conditioning of my childhood fighting against my logic. "I do not know, Gwen. It is my mom. If I report this, it is not just a family argument anymore. She could actually go to jail. Uncle Gary and the rest of the extended family will completely disown me. They will say I destroyed the family over money." Gwen slammed her hand down on the table, startling me. She leaned across the booth, looking me dead in the eyes. "Listen to me very carefully," Gwen said, emphasizing every single syllable. "She stopped being your mother the exact second she robbed you blind. She did not borrow money. She committed identity theft and wire fraud to fund Paige's luxury lifestyle. She completely stripped away your security because she views you as a piggy bank, not a daughter. This is not family drama anymore, Sloan. This is a severe federal felony." Hearing someone else say it out loud broke the spell. The guilt that Diane had spent 25 years programming into my brain just shattered. Gwen was right. Why was I protecting a woman who had never protected me? Why was I worried about destroying a family that had just casually destroyed my life savings? We spent the next 2 hours turning that diner booth into a war room. Gwen helped me email the audio recording to 3 different secure backup drives so it could never be deleted. We organized my bank statements, printed out a clear timeline of events, and categorized the forged document in a bright red folder. Gwen's cold, methodical efficiency grounded my chaotic emotions. By the time we left the diner, I was no longer a traumatized daughter crying over spilled coffee. I was a victim of a major financial crime, and I had a loaded weapon of evidence in my hands. I was going nuclear. If you are enjoying this story, please take a second to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling me what city you are living in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The Denver Police Department precinct was exactly as depressing and bureaucratic as you might imagine. When Gwen and I walked through the heavy glass doors, the air smelled like stale coffee, floor wax, and general misery. I clutched the bright red folder to my chest like a life preserver. We sat on hard plastic chairs in the waiting area for what felt like 3 separate lifetimes. Every time a uniformed officer walked past, my stomach did a nervous flip. Society trains you from a very young age to protect your family, to keep family business strictly inside the house. Walking into a police station to report your own mother feels like breaking a fundamental law of the universe. But then I thought about that zero balance in my savings account, and my resolve hardened into stone. Finally, a tired-looking man in a wrinkled dress shirt and a loose tie walked out and called my name. He introduced himself as Detective Navarro. We followed him through a maze of cubicles to a small, cluttered desk. When I first sat down and started explaining the situation, I could see his eyes glazing over just a little bit. He probably heard dozens of domestic disputes and messy family arguments every single week. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen on his desk, and gave me a sympathetic but dismissive look. "Miss Henderson, I understand you are upset," Detective Navarro said, his voice carrying the exhaustion of a man who had worked too many double shifts. But when it comes to joint accounts, especially ones involving parents and children, the lines get incredibly blurry. If her name was technically on the legacy profile, the district attorney is going to look at this as a civil dispute over shared assets. You would need to take this to a civil claims court, not the criminal fraud division. I felt a brief surge of panic, but Gwen gently placed her hand on my arm to steady me. I took a deep breath, opened the red folder, and slid the copy of the forged wire transfer document across his desk. Her name was on a legacy profile, yes, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. But that is my signature on the primary authorization line. I was sitting at my desk at my software company 20 miles away when this document was signed. And I did not sign it. Navarro stopped tapping his pen. He leaned forward, squinting at the paper. Then I pulled out my phone, unlocked the screen, and hit play on the audio recording I had captured just a few hours earlier. Diane's smug, arrogant voice filled the small cubicle space. Detective Navarro listened as my mother bragged about walking into the Aurora branch, lying about a medical coma, bypassing the tellers, and forging my name to move $25,000 to Paige. He listened to her call me selfish and demand that I accept the theft as a family contribution. The transformation in the detective's demeanor was instant and absolute. The tired, dismissive posture vanished. He sat up completely straight, his eyes wide and fully focused on me. "Well," Detective Navarro said quietly, letting out a long breath. "That changes absolutely everything." He pulled out a fresh notepad and a heavy black pen. He looked at me with a completely different level of respect. "Miss Henderson, what your mother described on that tape is not a family misunderstanding. That is first-degree identity theft. Combined with the movement of $25,000 across financial institutions under false pretenses, we are looking at severe wire fraud. These are major federal and state felonies. If you sign an official statement with me today, this leaves the realm of family drama. We will issue a warrant, and she will be arrested. I need you to understand that you cannot simply take this back tomorrow if you feel guilty." I looked at the pen he was holding out to me. I thought about the empty refrigerator from my childhood. I thought about Paige's designer shoes. I thought about my mother's complete lack of remorse. I took the pen, my hand completely steady, and I signed my name. The arrest happened 3 days later. I was not there to see it with my own eyes, but Detective Navarro called me later that afternoon to give me the official update, and Paige left me enough hysterical, screaming voicemails for me to piece together exactly how the morning unfolded. It was a Thursday morning. While I was sitting in my quiet apartment in Denver, peacefully brewing my morning tea and watching the sunrise over the Rocky Mountains, a completely different scene was playing out 30 miles away in the quiet, manicured suburbs of Aurora. At exactly 6 in the morning, 2 marked police cruisers and 1 unmarked detective vehicle pulled up into Diane's driveway. The neighborhood was perfectly silent, with just a few early morning joggers out on the sidewalks. According to Navarro, they did not politely ring the doorbell. They pounded heavily on the front door, the sound echoing loudly down the entire street. When Diane finally opened the door, wearing her expensive silk bathrobe and looking incredibly annoyed at the disturbance, she was greeted by 3 uniformed officers and Detective Navarro holding a freshly signed arrest warrant. I can only imagine the absolute shock on her face. Diane had lived her entire life believing she was the smartest person in any room. She genuinely believed that her actions had no consequences because she could manipulate her way out of anything. But you cannot gaslight a police warrant. Navarro told her she was being placed under arrest for first-degree identity theft and wire fraud. Diane immediately tried to argue. She tried to use her sweet, maternal voice to explain that it was just a silly misunderstanding with her ungrateful daughter. She told them they were making a terrible mistake. But the officers did not care. They asked her to step outside, turned her around, and placed her in cold metal handcuffs right there on her front porch for the entire neighborhood to see. Paige, who had been sleeping in the guest bedroom, woke up to the commotion. She ran downstairs just in time to see our mother being escorted to the back of a police cruiser. Paige started screaming hysterically, demanding to know what was going on. One of the officers politely informed Paige that her bank accounts were currently being frozen as part of an active felony fraud investigation, as she was the direct recipient of stolen funds. While Diane was sitting in a holding cell waiting to be processed, fingerprinted, and photographed for her mugshot, I was sitting on my comfortable couch, sipping my tea. For the first time in my entire 25 years of existence, I did not feel an ounce of anxiety about my mother. I felt a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. The monster that had terrorized my finances and my self-worth was finally locked in a cage of her own making. I knew the fallout was going to be massive. I knew my phone was going to explode with angry messages from relatives who only knew half the story. But in that quiet morning hour, I just let myself enjoy the silence. I had drawn a line in the sand, and when she crossed it, she fell straight off a cliff. The dominoes continued to fall the very next day. I was sitting at my desk working on some code when I received a frantic text message from Trevor, Paige's fiancé. It simply read, "Sloan, I need to see you right now. Please tell me what is going on." We agreed to meet at Cheeseman Park during my lunch break. When Trevor walked up to the bench where I was sitting, he looked physically ill. His face was pale, he had dark circles under his eyes, and his hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. This was a man who thought he was weeks away from marrying the love of his life, only to wake up and find his future mother-in-law in county jail. He sat down heavily next to me. "Sloan, please," Trevor said, his voice cracking. "Paige is completely hysterical. She is telling me that you went crazy, that you lied to the police to frame your mom over a simple bank error. But the police froze Paige's checking account this morning. The $25,000 is locked. Paige told me that money was a generous early wedding gift from you to help us start our life together. Is that true?" I stared at him, feeling a deep wave of pity. Paige had not just lied to me, she had been lying to this poor man for their entire relationship. She had racked up massive secret debt, and then she had convinced him that the stolen money was a sweet sisterly gift. I did not say a word at first. I just unzipped my bag, pulled out the bright red folder, and handed him the printed bank statements and the copy of the forged wire transfer. Then I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording of Diane confessing to the entire scheme. Trevor sat on the park bench, staring at the documents while Diane's cruel voice played from the phone speaker. I watched his heart break in real time. He realized that the woman he loved had not only buried them in secret, high-interest debt to buy luxury items, but had actively colluded with her mother to steal my life savings to cover it up, and then lied to his face about where the money came from. Trevor buried his face in his hands and let out a long, shaky breath. "She knew," he whispered. "Paige knew your mom stole it, and she just smiled and told me everything was fixed." "I am so sorry, Trevor," I said gently, "but you needed to know who you are marrying." He shook his head slowly, standing up from the bench. His sadness was rapidly morphing into cold, hard realization. "I am not marrying anyone," he said quietly. Later that evening, Trevor texted me a final update. He had gone straight back to the townhouse he shared with Paige. He packed all of his clothes, his electronics, and his important documents into his car. When Paige tried to stop him, crying and begging him to listen to her excuses, he simply placed her engagement ring on the kitchen counter and walked out the door. The wedding was officially canceled. Paige had lost her fiancé, her reputation, and her access to the stolen money all in the span of 48 hours. The collateral damage of their greed was absolute. That weekend, I received a phone call from a number I rarely saw pop up on my screen. It was Victor, my father. Victor and Diane had divorced when I was 12 years old. He simply could not handle her toxic, narcissistic behavior anymore, and he had moved away to Boulder, a city about 45 minutes north of Denver. Because Diane had manipulated the custody arrangements, Victor had slowly faded to the background of my life. When he heard through the family grapevine that Diane had been arrested for stealing from me, he immediately drove down from Boulder to see me. We met for dinner at a quiet steakhouse. He looked older than I remembered, with gray hair at his temples, but his eyes were kind. Victor sat across from me, listening intently as I laid out the entire sequence of events, the forged signature, the recording, the police raid, and Trevor canceling the wedding. When I finished, Victor closed his eyes and let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his temples. "Sloan, I am so incredibly sorry," Victor said, his voice thick with regret. "I am sorry I left you in that house with her. I knew exactly what she was capable of, and I was too much of a coward to fight her for full custody. I should have protected you." Hearing him say that validated years of childhood trauma, but I did not want to dwell on the past. "You are here now," I said, "and the police are handling it. She is going to face felony charges." Victor nodded slowly, taking a sip of his water. "Yes, she will face the criminal justice system. But there is something else, Sloan. Something much bigger that Diane and Paige have completely forgotten about, and it is going to ruin them financially forever." I leaned forward, my interest instantly piqued. "What do you mean?" Victor pulled a thick manila envelope out of his briefcase and set it on the table. "Your grandfather, my father, was a very wealthy and very shrewd businessman. When he passed away several years ago, he left behind a massive family trust fund. Because you and Paige were too young at the time, and because my father absolutely despised Diane's financial irresponsibility, he structured the trust payouts to be locked until certain conditions and age milestones were met." He opened the envelope and slid a dense legal document toward me. Diane's share, as a former spouse who was still written into the older version of the will, was sitting at $180,000. Paige's share, which unlocks when she turns 25, is $45,000. But my father had his lawyers write a very specific, ironclad rule into the foundation of the trust. We called it the kinship fraud clause. Victor pointed to a highlighted paragraph on the third page. "If any beneficiary of this trust is formally charged and convicted of committing a financial crime against another family member, they immediately and permanently forfeit their entire share of the estate. And their forfeited share is automatically redistributed to the victim of their crime." My jaw practically hit the table. I stared at the legal jargon, my brain struggling to do the math. Diane and Paige had conspired to steal $25,000 from me. In doing so, they had triggered a legal landmine that was going to cost them $225,000 of guaranteed inheritance. They have no idea, do they? I whispered, looking up at my dad. Victor smiled, a cold, hard smile that looked incredibly satisfying. No, Diane never read the fine print. She only ever saw the dollar signs. Tomorrow morning, we are going to my estate lawyer's office to officially freeze their portions of the trust pending the criminal trial. The news of Diane's arrest and the frozen trust fund spread through my extended family like wildfire. In toxic family dynamics, there is a term called flying monkeys, the enablers who swoop in to attack the victim and protect the abuser just to maintain the dysfunctional status quo. My family had a whole flock of them, led by my mother's brother, Uncle Gary. Uncle Gary was the ultimate hypocrite. He loved to preach about family loyalty and Christian forgiveness, but he had never once offered me a place to stay or a hot meal when I was struggling as a teenager. Starting on Monday morning, my phone became a battleground. Uncle Gary left 3 agonizingly long voicemails on my phone, his voice dripping with condescension. "Sloan, this has gone entirely too far," Uncle Gary said on the second voicemail. "Your mother made a small error in judgment because she was trying to save your sister's wedding. Yes, she should have asked properly, but sending the police to her house? Tossing her in jail? Trying to steal her inheritance? You are tearing this family apart over some pieces of paper. You need to call the district attorney, drop these ridiculous charges, and come to my house this weekend so we can pray on this and heal as a family. Do not be vindictive, Sloan." I listened to the messages while sitting at my kitchen island. A younger version of me would have felt guilty. A younger version of me would have caved to the pressure of the family patriarch. But the woman who had just survived having her life savings wiped out felt nothing but pure, unadulterated anger. I did not call him back. I did not want to hear his voice, and I wanted everything in writing. I opened my messaging app, typed out a long, methodical text message, and hit send. The message read, "Uncle Gary, let us get a few facts completely straight. Diane did not make a small error in judgment. She committed first-degree identity theft and wire fraud. She lied to a bank teller, forged my legal signature, and stole $25,000 that I worked for years to save. She did not do it to save a wedding. She did it to cover up Paige's massive, secret credit card debt. When I confronted her, she laughed at me and called me selfish. You love to talk about family loyalty, Gary, but where was your loyalty when I was 16 years old, working night shifts just to buy myself a winter coat while you all praised Paige? You do not care about family healing. You only care about making this uncomfortable situation go away so you do not have to deal with the reality that your sister is a felon. They made their bed. Now they get to lie in it. Do not ever contact me again." As soon as the text showed as delivered, I blocked his phone number. Then I went through my contact list and systematically blocked every single aunt, uncle, and cousin who had taken Diane's side. With every block, a heavy weight lifted off my shoulders. I was not just cutting off my mother and sister, I was amputating the entire diseased branch of my family tree. I chose peace over toxic obligation, and the silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The next morning, Victor and I drove to downtown Denver to meet with Mr. Caldwell, the strict, heavily credentialed estate lawyer who managed my grandfather's trust fund. His office was intimidating, filled with heavy mahogany furniture, leather-bound law books, and the quiet hum of expensive air conditioning. Mr. Caldwell sat behind his massive desk, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he carefully reviewed the documents I had brought him. He read through the official police report, the copy of the forged wire transfer, and the preliminary indictment from the district attorney's office. The room was silent for a long time, save for the rustling of heavy paper. Finally, Mr. Caldwell looked up, folding his hands together on the desk. He did not show much emotion, but there was a sharp glint of professional satisfaction in his eyes. "Your grandfather was an incredibly perceptive man," Mr. Caldwell said, his voice deep and resonant. "He specifically asked me to draft the kinship fraud clause because he suspected Diane might one day attempt to manipulate the estate assets. He wanted to ensure that any predatory behavior would be met with absolute financial ruin. It appears his foresight was perfectly accurate. So, what happens now? I asked, leaning forward in my leather chair. Do we have to wait for the criminal trial to finish before the trust is protected? No, Mr. Caldwell replied firmly. Because there is an active federal and state felony indictment with hard evidence of forgery, I have the fiduciary authority to immediately freeze all distributions to Diane and Paige Henderson. Their access to the $180,000 and the $45,000 respectively is completely locked as of this morning. He pulled out a fresh stack of legal documents with little yellow sign here tabs sticking out of the edges. Once Diane and Paige either plead guilty or are convicted by a jury, the clause automatically executes. Their shares will be permanently forfeited, liquidated, and redistributed entirely into your primary beneficiary account. I am filing the injunction with the probate court this afternoon. I will also be sending formal legal notices to Diane's defense attorney, making them fully aware that the trust is now frozen due to her criminal actions. I picked up the heavy, expensive pen Mr. Caldwell offered me and signed my name on the dotted lines, officially authorizing him to enforce the will. Victor put a hand on my shoulder as I signed. She thought she was so clever taking that 25 grand, Victor muttered, shaking his head. Wait until her lawyer explains that her little stunt just cost her $250,000. Walking out of that law office, stepping into the bright Denver sunlight, I felt a profound sense of closure. The trap was set, the evidence was airtight, and the legal machinery was moving. Diane had spent my entire life trying to keep me financially insecure, but in her greed, she had accidentally handed me the keys to absolute financial freedom. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. 2 agonizingly long months later, I found myself sitting in the back row of a freezing cold courtroom in downtown Denver. The heavy wooden benches creaked under the weight of anticipation. I was wearing a sharp, dark blazer, sitting next to Victor and Gwen, waiting for the final act of this nightmare to conclude. The heavy oak doors swung open, and Diane and Paige walked in, followed closely by their overworked defense attorney. The change in their appearance was absolutely staggering. Diane, who usually looked like she had just stepped out of a luxury salon, looked aged, exhausted, and incredibly small. Her hair was flat, and her expensive clothes hung loosely on her frame. Paige looked completely hollowed out, her eyes downcast, refusing to look anywhere but the floor. The prosecutor had built an inescapable case. Between the bank manager's testimony, the forged document, and the audio recording of Diane literally bragging about the crime, they had absolutely no chance in front of a jury. To avoid spending up to 5 years in a state penitentiary, their lawyer had aggressively negotiated a plea deal. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for nonsense, peered over her glasses at my mother. Diane Henderson, you are before this court to enter a plea regarding charges of first-degree identity theft and wire fraud. How do you plead? Diane's voice was barely a whisper, completely stripped of its usual arrogance. Guilty, Your Honor. The judge nodded and read the terms of the sentencing. Diane was sentenced to 3 full years of strict supervised probation. If she missed a single check-in, she would go straight to jail. She was ordered to complete 300 hours of hard community service, and she was mandated to pay full restitution to the credit union. Most importantly, she was now a convicted felon. Paige, who had actively helped plan the theft but had not forged the signature, accepted a lesser misdemeanor charge of being an accessory after the fact, resulting in 1 year of probation and massive court fines. But the criminal sentencing was just the beginning of their ruin. Because Diane was now a convicted felon with a financial crime on her record, she immediately lost her state corporate management license. Her employer ran a mandatory background check and fired her on the spot. She was forced to move out of her beautiful suburban home and into a tiny, rundown studio apartment, taking a minimum wage job working the cash register at a retail pharmacy just to survive. Paige's life completely imploded. Without Trevor's income, and with her bank accounts flagged for fraud, she could not secure a decent loan to pay off her massive credit card debt. She was forced into predatory consolidation loans with staggering 25% interest rates, trapping her in a cycle of poverty she would likely never escape. Before they left the courtroom, Diane stopped at the aisle and looked directly at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, a desperate, pathetic plea for forgiveness from the daughter she had thrown to the wolves. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply looked right through her, turned my back, and walked out the door. 6 months have passed since that day in the courtroom. Life has a funny way of balancing the scales when you finally decide to stop letting people walk all over you. Shortly after the conviction, the credit union's insurance policies kicked in, and they fully refunded the original $25,000 that Diane had stolen from me, desperate to avoid a massive civil negligence lawsuit. But that was just a drop in the bucket. Once the guilty pleas were officially stamped by the court clerk, Mr. Caldwell executed the kinship fraud clause in my grandfather's trust. Diane and Paige were formally stripped of their beneficiary status. 2 weeks later, a massive wire transfer cleared into a newly established, ultra-secure account at a completely different national bank. $225,000. I stared at the number on my screen, sitting in my apartment, and just cried. Not tears of panic, but tears of absolute, overwhelming relief. I was safe. I was finally truly safe. I used a portion of the money to put a down payment on a beautiful little townhouse in a quiet neighborhood near the mountains, far away from Aurora. I set up a bulletproof emergency fund, invested the rest in conservative index funds, and finally bought myself some new furniture that was not secondhand. I also started going to weekly therapy sessions. Healing from 25 years of emotional abuse and financial trauma does not happen overnight just because your bank account is full. Therapy helped me realize that setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of self-preservation. Family ties are supposed to be built on mutual respect, love, and protection, not one-sided demands and toxic obligations. My life is so quiet now, and I love every single second of it. I spend my weekends hiking the steep trails near Boulder with Gwen, pushing myself physically and mentally. I have Sunday dinners with my dad, Victor, rebuilding the relationship that Diane had stolen from us when I was a kid. I changed my phone number, deleted my old social media accounts, and left the flying monkeys of my extended family to drown in their own toxic drama. I am finally free. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is completely quiet, I catch myself thinking about the sheer scale of the destruction. I look at my safe, secure life, and I know it was built on the ashes of my mother and sister's greed. Some people in my extended family who still talk to my dad whisper that I went entirely too far. They say that sending my own mother to court, giving her a felony record, and then taking every last penny of her inheritance on top of it was cold, vindictive, and ruthless. So, what do you guys think? Am I the villain for enforcing the trust fund clause and taking every last dime they had, or did they get exactly the reality check they deserved? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a daily dose of Reddit drama. See you in the next video.